with a good overview of what React is and the fact that it is used to create really interactive front-end applications in a user's browser. Now we can jump into actually creating a React app and beginning to dive deeper into what makes a React app and how we use it to build those user interfaces. Now, if you go to React's website at react.js.org and you go to the tutorial webpage, there is a nice little tutorial that will run through manually creating a React app and starting out with your first component right down here with a shopping list. Now, this is a really good tutorial. So if you get stuck or if you want to do an additional exercise other than what we're doing in this video, I would suggest that you come back and you learn how to build a React app from scratch through the use of this tutorial. Now, since we want to get started with a more complex React app and we really want to dive into doing React the way you will do it when you become a professional software developer, we're going to go ahead and use a utility that is commonly used out there in industry to start off a single page React application. And the reason why we're going to use this utility is it really helps us structure the single page application in a very easy to understand as well as very logically organized project structure that makes maintaining and working within a React app extremely easy. I do want to point out that React apps, we could actually start with just a folder and a single JavaScript file, and that could be our entire application. And we could also become extremely complex in how we build out that application structure, and we can make it 100% customized. In other words, React does not dictate how you set up and create your projects. It only dictates how components are created and how they interact with each other. In order to make sure that we follow a well-designed as well as well-used project structure, we're going to be using what is called CreateReactApp. Now, CreateReactApp was created by Facebook, who are, of course, the makers of React. And this CreateReactApp sets up a really neat and nice folder structure for us that is easy for us to understand and to work with. So we're going to do that first. Now, if you come to the CreateReactApp Git repository on GitHub, and you look up CreateReactApp, find the one that is made by Facebook. And here we've got the documentation. Now, by this point in time, I'm assuming that you've gone through all of the node.js as well as the JavaScript tutorials and videos, so you understand what NPM is as well as what NPX is. And so we will be using NPX in order to create the app, and then of course NPM to start the application so that we can see it running. To do this, of course, we're going to need to create the app first using NPX. And we saw how to do that during the Node.js videos, but we're going to do it again. And as I've explained in previous videos, under my user account, I have a folder called dev. And in that folder, I also have a folder I call sandbox. And this is where I like to put code where I am just messing around or learning a new technology. And then when I actually create repositories where I'm going to store code for projects I'm working on, I put that in a folder called repos. So I'm going to be in Sandbox right now because we're really just learning how to do this. We're not creating an application. We're not putting it in a repository. So I'm going to put it right here. Now with that, we're going to go ahead and use command line tools to do this. I'm on a Mac, and so I'm going to be using the terminal. On Windows, you'll be using your command prompt, but the commands that we execute are going to be pretty close to the exact same for both systems, especially when we're talking about NPM and NPX. Now, navigating through the folder structure using a terminal or the command prompt in Windows is similar, and there are a couple commands that are different, and I will point out which ones are different when we use them. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my terminal. Here is my terminal, and I am going to just use ls to see where I'm at. On a Windows, you would type dir in order to list the contents of the current directory that you are in. On a Linux machine or a Mac OS or Apple machine, you just use ls. And it should show you all the files and folders within the directory that you're currently at. And when you first start up your terminal or your command prompt, you should be in the root of your user account. And you can see under my user, here's that dev folder that I like to use. So I will do a cd for change directory. That's the same both on Windows and on Mac. And I'm going to change directory to dev, hit enter. And if I do ls or on Windows dir, and I hit enter, I should see a list of all the files and folders. And like I told you, I'm going to be going into my sandbox over here. So let's go ahead and do a cd into sandbox. And I'll do a list again. And we can see right here the old folder. You can see the old folder listed right here. All right, so now you should be in wherever it is that you're going to store your projects. If you're following the same pattern, it's dev and then sandbox, or it might be for you projects and then learning, or learning and then projects. It's totally up to you. It doesn't really matter as long as you know where you're storing your stuff. Now, if we come back here to the CreateReactApp documentation, you'll see that we can use NPX CreateReactApp right here. And then we provide the name of the application that we are going to be creating. And what will happen is it will create a folder with the name of our application, and it will put all of the files inside of that folder. So I'm going to go ahead and pull back up my Pathfinder, or if you're using a Mac without Pathfinder, it would be just Finder, or on Windows, it would be your Windows Explorer. I'm going to open up my terminal. And I'm going to go ahead and follow that command that we saw down here. I'm going to highlight it right there in the clear space. So we're going to do npx create-react-app. And then the name of your application, being that this is my demo app and we are just going to learn how to use React, I am going to call this let's call it my to-dos, because we're going to create a little to-do application as we learn React. I go ahead and hit enter, and we should see it's going to begin to fetch and download all of the stuff it needs to execute the CreateReactApp npm module. We should see down here in our folder, we've got a new my to-dos folder being generated, and you should be able to see that as this executes here up in my terminal, we'll see new files and folders being added down here to the My To-Dos application. And here you'll see it executing. They give you a nice little bar that shows you where they're at on downloading and executing all of the dependencies that come with this CreateReactApp application. And let's go down here and see, yep, it's still just downloading stuff. Downloading all the dependencies it needs in order to build the application. At some point here, it will finish downloading all of its resources and all of the scripts it needs, and then it will begin executing them. And then we should begin to see new files and folders being created here. Now right here, really what's happening is you can see your node modules folder right here. It's actually downloading and installing all of these NPM packages. You can see there's just a ton of them that are used in this CreateReactApp application. And we'll get into the reason why in a little while. So we'll just know that we're using a ton of node modules in order to build a React application. And those are what are being downloaded and installed right now, as well as any other tools and utilities that the CreateReactApp NPX module, well, it's an NPM module that gets executed by NPX, needs in order to set up our first React application. So we'll go ahead and give it a little bit more time to do its setup, and then we should be able to dive right into the application that we need, or we can jump right into building the application and exploring the folder structure and seeing how we can run it for the first time in our browsers. All right, it looks like it has completed. You can see it went through, installed all the dependencies, and then it went through and created the entire directory structure that we needed. and set everything up so we're ready to go. And if we come down here and we look at our my to-dos application right here, you can see we have a publics folder, a resources folder, a sources folder, sorry, a package, readme, and yarn lock. Being that it has a package.json and a node modules folder, you can see that the majority of this is being manipulated and controlled by npm. You also have the option to use yarn if you want to use it as your package manager. I prefer npm, so I'm going to stick with my package.json and my npm modules to do this. I'm not going to worry about yarn. Now, some of the packages inside of my node modules actually used yarn in order to do its compilations and stuff. So that's why we have a yarn.lock in here. So we'll just go ahead and stick with npm to run our application. Now, before we run our My To-Dos app, one thing I want to show you is that with the NPX CreateReactApp, you can do it the way we did it, where you specify the name of the project that you want to create using, let's go back down one command, by providing the app name right here. Now, if you already have a folder, so let's go ahead and create a new folder, and let's just call it Test React App. If I already have a folder that I want to put my project in, and I want my project to be at the root of this folder, what I can do is instead of it, well, if I went like this, let's say I already have that folder and that's where I want my application to be. If I do a list or dir and I see my test React app there and I cd into my test React app and I do an ls or a dir, I would see nothing is in there. And because I already have the folder set up, maybe I cloned a repository, and this is the repository that I want the app to be in. So I created the repository on GitHub first, and now I want to create the app inside of this directory instead of having it create a directory. If I went and I executed this command right here again, what would happen is inside of my test React app, it would create a new folder called My To-Dos, and inside of it, it would build the application, which in a Git repository, I really don't want another folder with all of my files in it. I want all of my React app files to be in here. And so what we can do is if we are in the folder where we want the React app to be created, we can just use the dot instead of providing an application name. And when we do that, the CreateReactApp, instead of creating a new folder and putting all of the application files inside of that folder, it will simply use the currently selected directory. That's the directory that we are in inside of our terminal or command prompt. And it will then create all of the files and resources inside of this. So I'll show you an example right here, and we'll probably terminate it before it's done because it takes too long. But you can see I'm using just the period or the wildcard, which specifies the current directory. I hit enter. We should see down here in about a second, we should see new files being created in here. You can see the package.json right there. You can see the node modules begin to be created. And you can see that it's not inside of a folder. It's actually in the root of the folder that we are in. Now I'm going to do a command C on this and stop it from completing. We don't want to wait on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. I was just showing you that if you already have a Git repository cloned from GitHub and you want to just create a React app inside of that empty repository, use the period instead of giving it a name. All right, so we've got our My To-Do apps right here. Now we're going to open it up in Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and do that. If you have your terminal open, here we're going to get back to our, I went into the trash because I deleted that. So let's do cd /, that puts me back in my user account, cd dev, and then let's do cd sandbox, and then we called it My To-Dos. So now we should be back in that. All right. Pretty cool. When you delete a folder and that's where you're at in the terminal, it actually puts you into that folder in the trash can when you're on a Mac. Just keep that in mind. All right. So now we're in our To-Do app. So we are in this folder right here inside of our terminal. And Let's do an ls so we can see. There's our readme, our package.json node modules, our public, all that kind of stuff. And we want to go ahead and open it up with Visual Studio Code. And so if you remember correctly, there is a command for Visual Studio Code in order to open the current directory. And I think it's something like vsweb period. Nope. Let's open up our Visual Studio Code. And let's get this set up because it is super useful. And I'm not sure everybody has it turned on by default. So let's see if we can find it. Let's see, open, let's do terminal or command prompt, and let's see if we can find that. Integrate, terminal integrated automation shell Linux, shell Windows. Where is the one that lets us open it? Well, let's do a search really quick because we want to make sure we know how to do this for future reference, because it comes in super handy when you're in the terminal and you want to open something up in your IDE. So let's figure it out. Visual Studio Code, open in terminal. And if you're on Windows, you want to say open in command prompt. So let's go ahead and open this one up. That'll show us in the terminal. And let's do command line in Windows. Open Visual Studio Code and access the command palette and start typing the shell command and select option shell command install code command in path. So this is the one that you want if you're on Windows. So make sure you read this one right here and it'll tell you how to get it all set up for Windows so that you can just type code and then open it up in the directory. So why don't you run through that one, and let's see what we do for integration in terminal on a Mac. I don't think this is the same thing. Visual Studio Code can open an integrated terminal. That's not what we want. We want the same thing over here where we can use Visual Studio Code and we want to do code. Here we go. So it's probably the same thing. It's probably similar to this, like shell command, install code command in path. So let's see if we can do the same thing on our Mac as we can on Windows. And the command is Shift Command P. So Shift Command P. And then we are supposed to look for shell command. All right, so Shift Command P. Shell command, install code command in path. Shell command code successfully installed in path. Right, so let's close code. And then let's go ahead and see if we can use our terminal to open up this folder. See if everything works now. So it's code and then dot, hit enter. Perfect. So now if we're in the terminal and we ever need to open up the current folder that we are in the terminal with Visual Studio Code, we can simply type code and then period for the current directory. And you can see my current directory is right here. So it opened up to-dos in our Visual Studio Code. Super awesome. All right, now let's open up our package.json and we can see that as we're familiar with, to start this application, we can use the npm start command and it will run the React scripts start command, which then will compile our user interface from our source and then create a distribution copy. And we'll go into how that works later. And then we should be able to run our application and see what it looks like in the browser. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Let's go ahead and do npm start. So let's run that script right here. You can also do it by just opening the terminal and typing npm start, but I just hovered over that and then clicked run when that pop-up came up. It's an easy way to do it too. Here we go. We are running our React app on localhost port 3000. So this is our application running on our local machine as though our machine is the web server. And we are actually accessing a React app. So if I do inspect on this, we should see that we've got an HTML page. And inside of that HTML page, we do see that an app is getting loaded right here under div class app. We now have this page being loaded right here for us. And our React app is working. Excellent. We will then move on in the upcoming tutorial on going through our actual application right here and seeing what exactly was created for us when we used CreateReactApp and what each of the folders and all of the files inside these folders, what they're used for and what they do for us in order to build really interactive front-end applications, or front ends, as people like to refer them to, in our browsers for our overall web applications backed by web APIs.